Welcome to Edison TV. I'm Catherine Thompson, Technology Analyst at Edison, and I'm here today with Kit Kyte, CEO of software company Checkit. Kit, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, Catherine.
Yep. So for those who don't already know Checkit, could you give us a quick overview of the company and the problems that your software is seeking to solve?
Yeah, sure. So Checkit is a software company, software and IT. So what we do is we digitize what we call deskless workers, people who work in large blue chip FTSE 100, Fortune 500 companies. Those companies have distributed operations. So lots of people doing relatively low complex work, deskless work, not sitting behind a computer all day long, across many different sites, hundreds if not thousands. Ours is a cloud-based platform. So what we do is we take the work they would typically do, which is on pen and paper for about 73% of all workers, or in Excel spreadsheets, and our workflow management tool digitizes all that work so they can operate it using an Android device or an iPad or an iPhone, and then they can do their work in real time, being guided and tasked through the different stages of the work they need to do. Accompanying that, we have an IoT ecosystem. So these people, they work in physical spaces, be they restaurants, be they warehouses, be they hospitals, in which they interact with assets, fridges, freezers, vaccine storage units, etc. We have IoT sensor devices that will monitor those assets, typically where very specific temperature controls are required, or things like air quality management or something like this, and they will replace the need for humans to have to go check those assets, and they'll feed that data in real time back into the same platform, so you're getting the human work, the asset work, all monitored digitally in one place, in one platform. And then on the top, what we do is we then provide an organizational view to the operational leaders, because it's typically those people who we target, COOs or CXO-1s, and we give them insights, analytics, and visibility as to how their operation is now working, okay? And so if you think about the problem we're solving here, it's manifold. You've got the rising cost of labor, supply chain challenges, inflation, and for a lot of these businesses, these large organizations, you have a significant amount of employee turnover, okay, so heavy attrition rates. Okay, so that's knowledge walking out of the door, you have to get new people in, how do they know what they need to do? We solve for that because what we're able to do is keep the knowledge inside the system so you can rapidly onboard new people, and then also improve the employee experience as you go through. Key things we're looking to help solve our customers are things like cost, efficiency, employee productivity, but also things like wastage. So think food wastage, think clinical wastage. These things have heavy cost bills for organizations. So when you bring those things together and you give them real-time visibility as to how their businesses and their operations are running, that becomes a real value lever for the organization.
Right. And customers using your platform generate vast quantities of data from their kind of day-to-day operations. How do you help them harness that data to improve their performance?
Right, yeah, so again, so imagine we're effectively taking organizations from what's typically an analog world, people using pen and paper, spreadsheets, people manually checking assets, and then trying to bring that together in some rudimentary form to figure out what's really happening, yeah? So it's very, 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 let's just say 1990s, yeah? And whilst we're in 2023, the rest of the world's got digitalization, automation coming up to the fore. So by taking that fundamental work and the insights that we get from the assets and the way the work's being done by people and digitizing it, bringing it into one space, what we're providing is fundamentally is visibility. When you've got visibility, you can take corrective action, you can look at your processes, you can look at the KPIs, the SLAs that you actually expect your organization to be running to, and then you can actually see whether it's really running to that level. These organizations have compliance challenges, risk problems, quality problems. They have significant cost centers associated with the people doing that work. And more often than not, especially in today's world, you're looking to figure out how you can do more with less. That doesn't necessarily mean do more with less people, but with the people you've got, do more higher value adding work with them, okay? Automate that which you can, digitize the rest. So that's how we're helping them. So if you think about the three levers that organizations typically need to be able to solve for, it's revenue, it's cost, and it's risk. Checkit particularly plays in the cost and the risk buckets, but also, as we've seen, when you gather the data, you can start to impact revenue. So I'll give you an example. There's a client of ours, a very large blue chip integrated oil and gas company, won't name the name. Having gathered the data across all of their locations in the UK, where they provide effectively service station services, we were able to build a machine learning algorithm that could help them better predict the types of sales and demand by hour of the day and by approximate location, such that they could better position their products, literally be they food products, pasties, coffee, you name it, ice creams if it's seasonal, to hit that demand. And what we helped them uncover was a really interesting anecdote. So the most in-demand product for this organization was a bacon and cheese flip, a cup of black coffee, and a packet of chewing gum at 2:00 in the morning. And so you're like, well, who is that person that wants that? And actually, it's lorry drivers. Lorry drivers would also take a lot of fuel at the same time. So if you're not serving that need, then you're going to lose the fuel need and the food need at the same time. They're going to go somewhere else because they all speak to each other. And it's just a really interesting example of how you can make the data drive value for organizations.
And you set pretty ambitious targets for the US. Could you give us a bit of a feel for the opportunity you see there, the competitive environment, but also what your plans are to grow there?
Yeah, so the US for us represents a compelling opportunity, and there are some obvious reasons which I'll unpack in a bit about as to where we're looking to focus. But if I just reflect on what we've achieved so far, last year we've grown the US's ARR footprint by about 91% year on year, so that's really great, really positive. US can be a notoriously hard market to break into and actually keep your nose above the water, especially for a UK company. So we're quietly pleased with the work that's been done so far. Really what we're doing is, the typical approach we're following is a sort of a land and expand model. Okay, so again, thinking about our priority customers, they are the large blue chip, multinational, many site location company. Now, in the US, for example, they have 9 out of 10 of the world's largest franchise operators. So food retail is one of the industry verticals that we're particularly strong in. It makes a lot of sense to be playing in a market with that many big name brands with thousands of locations for us to potentially work in. Another area where we've been quite successful so far is within healthcare, is within the biopharma industry, where again, the majority of the world's biopharma companies happen to have a base and a large footprint in the US. And so the combination of our IoT sensor assets, so in this case, if you think biopharma, it's medical monitoring, it's safety, it's assurance compliance, with the workflow engine, the platform, it becomes quite a sticky solution for the US. So the opportunity there is we have to be very focused. We focus very, very much on the healthcare vertical, the food retail vertical, and then within that, and then sort of restaurants and hospitalities. Okay, and that's where we're looking to play in the US only at the moment, as we seek to land and then expand out.
Great. So looking at your operations in the US and comparing that to what you're doing in the UK, could you talk a little bit about the differences between operating in the two geographies? So things like type of customer, contract size, ease of doing business.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, sure. So where we see the UK and Europe, effectively you've got much more fragmented buying environment, different cultures, different languages, although the UK is much more in tune with technology, software-focused growth, and definitely wouldn't take more risk than, let's say, some of our European neighbours. Where you get a significant benefit in the US, one is around scale, so just the market, 7 times the size of the UK, of course. One common buying language, and actually a common way of doing business, which is typically to take on more risk because they embrace technology solutions just that much quicker. And so what we see is, from a sales cycle perspective, it's not that the sales cycles themselves are dramatically shorter than the UK. It's more that the confidence in the sales cycle goes up, because effectively you learn quite early that you get the buying signals will be given to you quite early that they're interested in this and they've got the budget set aside and they're going to go ahead. Whereas typically in the UK, someone will say they're interested, but they'll sort of come to look at the budget and people start putting their belts in, and actually they think that's what starts to draw out the sales cycle, and you don't quite know if you're going to get there. In the US, once they've got a certain level of commitment, they'll dial it in pretty quickly. And so again, that's the opportunity in the US. Now, the flip side is also true, which is they'll tell you very early into the sales cycle, not interested, don't care, go away. I personally prefer that. I think we all prefer that kind of clarity. So, and then of course, when you think about the contract size, again, in the US, you're looking at contract sizes that shouldn't be less than 2 to 3 times the opportunity size that we'd see in the UK. Just again, because it's a question of scale, it's a question of reach. But the interesting thing with the US is where I think there are some challenges is because it's such a large, geographically dispersed place. If you're thinking about how do you scale up in the US, like we are at the moment, well, we've got our sort of US leader is based in San Francisco. We've got people on the East Coast. We've got people down in Florida. So you have a really dispersed team that works almost entirely virtually, unless they come together. And also, how do you split up that geography, regionally? So do you have a sort of geographical focus, or do you have an industry focus, or do you have a bit of both? And so these have been interesting learnings we go through. We've actually settled on just having an industry focus, regardless of where it is in the country, and building specializations around that. But in the UK, of course, it's a lot easier, and indeed Europe, because you can just get coverage across the place pretty quickly.
Yep. And while you're clearly focused on growing ARR, or annual recurring revenue, could you talk a bit about how you balance growth with profitability?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been quite clear that the challenge now is to pursue a sort of aggressive path to profitability whilst maintaining, above average growth rates and consistent growth rates. And thus far, we're getting the balance about right. I mean, look, the challenge, there's a few things I think that shape that. First of all, it's the appetite in the market. If you think about it, sort of maybe a year and a half ago, we were coming to the back end of kind of quite a sustained growth phase, and with sustained growth phases, people get quite greedy and they want big growth at all costs, and actually they're willing to overlook, bigger losses to sustain that growth. That world is in the rearview mirror now, and with that requires a much more stringent focus on how you're managing your costs to achieve that growth. And so what we do, so the way we've changed that is we're taking a very ROI-led approach to how we invest to support outsized growth rates. So effectively, in the past, you'd hire ahead of demand. You'd be like, look, I want this much pipe and this many sales. That requires this many people. I'll start getting the people in now with a view to it just flowing through. Actually, we think about it a bit differently now. We think about, as we make an investment in someone, we need to already have significant visibility on the pipeline, for example, or the opportunity that's already going to be fed to this person. And as they demonstrate the right amount of ROI, if it's a people hire, we'll then get behind it and get another person in for those things that work. So where we see green shoots, we invest, but where we don't, we actually just hold back and be very focused on doing everything as efficiently as we can.
Great. Well, thanks, Kit, for coming in and giving us this update, and I look forward to hearing more when you report your full year results in April.
Great. Thanks a lot, Catherine. It's a pleasure.